Oh, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Your presence, your listening is a gift. What I'm about to share with you is to take you on a journey of something that I have discovered that is absolutely magical. I would say this is the most profound, radical discovery I've made in my life, and in some ways I have never found this anywhere else in the world. I call it Intrinsic Abundance. We're going to go through this piece by piece. What I have here is mostly covered up. It's a map. You could consider it a map of life itself. We're going to go through it and we're going to build it little by little because it's such a crazy, crazy thing. In some ways, I don't even know how to describe this to other people. And so this is a learning journey for me, and I'm taking you along for the ride. So in some ways, you could say that this is based on an existing theory, and I've expanded upon an existing scientific theory that has been around since 1985 called Self-Determination Theory. So yes, in some ways, what I'm going to share is totally new. I haven't really found it other places, but you could say this is 10 years of revelations I've had, piece by piece, and it started to build a bigger puzzle. So we're going to start with self-determination theory. In 1985, researchers Ed Deci and Richard Ryan were looking at motivation, that some people were very passionate and very motivated and driven. It's like they had a vision that other people didn't have. What leads those people to be so passionate? And I have to say, in my struggle to find other passionate people in the world, it is a very rare thing. You might as well consider it magic. And in their pursuit in being curious about this, they discovered something so much bigger. They discovered that people had three basic needs that lead them to live a motivated, passionate life. And beyond that, a life that is liberated, that is empowered. So it's like, well, once you understand it, no wonder they're so passionate. They are empowered. They are liberated. They are free. They're deeply alive. And we're going to say then, what are those three needs? Well, here they are. Let's go through the first, autonomy. This on its own is magical. So in some ways you can think of autonomy as freedom or as free will, but we're going to go a little more specific. Autonomy is the ability to make choices in your own life. You could almost think of it as the bond of responsibility and freedom together. And these are really inseparable. So if you find it enjoyable, you may say, well, it's freedom. But if you find it challenging, you'd say, well, it's responsibility. But in the end, it is your choice. Responsibility, your ability to respond. This is autonomy. I make choices over my own life. And if you can make those choices, you can live within your morals, within your values. You can live the lifestyle you find is meaningful, find is purposeful, enjoyable. You can pursue those things effectively. What a wonderful life. Let's go to the second one, competence. I would say competence is comprised of three parts: skill, wisdom, knowledge. And so this is the realm of learning. If you become very skillful at something, you can do some amazing things. If you see an artist that does something amazing, something that's beautiful, most people can't do that. What an incredible thing to do. If you could do something most people can't. And just the process of learning can be very playful. And you can feel excited and interested by immersing in that. Well, this is enjoyable just because it's fun, or just because it's challenging. And then you get excited because you get better at it, or you discover new ways of doing things. And if you can become crazy skillful, then it's a whole different world. And then there's also wisdom. Maybe you learn about life in ways that makes you suffer less. You learn hard lessons that prevent you from that terrible, terrible experience again in the future. That's wisdom. And, looking at just knowledge too. If you have more information and knowledge about the world around you, then you can make better choices. There's the word choices. Better choices. That's interesting. It's almost like these affect each other. We're going to come back to that. Let's go to the third piece. Interconnection. Interconnection are your relationships in life with other people. You could even expand further and say with other living creatures. Your sense of being in the forest, being with the trees and the birds, or if you have a pet cat, a bond with an animal can be wonderful. But also, primarily, your relationships with other people, because human beings are very social creatures. We must have relationships. It is inevitable that we depend on each other to get through this life. Now, if you have very high quality relationships, you have people supporting you and listening to you through the good, the bad, the ugly. You're in it together. You support them and listen to them. It's wonderful. It's a great part of life, and it makes life very meaningful. So if you have relationships that are respectful to everyone's autonomy, those are very powerful relationships. It's not relationships where you have this conflict where people are trying to boss you around or bully you or manipulate you. If you have very high quality relationships, you are respecting each other's autonomy, and you've found a way to do that effectively, which means you are competent. There's so many ways you can combine these together, and it changes everything. So I was thinking one day, and I was writing, and I was looking at wealth and poverty. And I noticed that a lot of people, most people around me, and even in economics is a topic I study closely because I think it's highly relevant to empower the individual, economic empowerment. And so I was thinking about that a lot of people, when they define wealth and poverty, is based on materialism. If you have a lot of stuff and high quality stuff and a lot of money, you're very wealthy. And if you have very little money and not very many things and crappy quality things, you're very poor. And I'd never really seen a way of defining wealth and poverty that was different from that. And it started, I'd always thought there was something wrong with this, but I hadn't gone too far in depth with it. And I was just like, something seems to be missing, because you can have people on every part of the spectrum from poor to rich, as people define it, very few things, lots of stuff, and you can find all kinds of people that they're just not satisfied with life. They don't feel very free or empowered. Their life is not very meaningful or purposeful. Or you could also find people that have very, very few things, and they are totally free. They feel as if they're living a rich, meaningful life. They are living a rich life, yet they have very few things, and they'd be defined as poor. How could they be poor and rich at the same time? So something about the definition of wealth and poverty seemed wrong, as if materialism is not the answer, as if materialism was a myth or an ideology, materialism, almost like a religion. So I asked myself, well, if materialism is not wealth, what is wealth? And then I thought, what if self-determination is true wealth? Wow, what an idea. And so I played around with it. Autonomy. I make choices in my own life. I can live within my moral values. I have flexibility. I don't have to stress out because I have to put up with things I have no control over. I don't have to tolerate terrible things because I can choose something better. I don't have to be concerned about disasters or tragic or evil things happening because I have the choices to work around it. So even if terrible things happen, I can respond effectively. That sounds like wealth to me. What about competence? Well, I have some wisdom, so I can respond to life's hardships and difficulties wisely, so that I'm not just aimlessly suffering, or I'm not making the same mistakes over and over again. I see that I've made a mistake, I learn from it, I can free myself from having to do it again. I'm knowledgeable, I'm skillful, I'm wise, I'm strong. That sounds like empowerment to me. It sounds like wealth. What about interconnection? Think about someone close to you in life, or the last time you had an experience where someone really listened to you. They heard what you were saying, they listened, and they had the opportunity for empathy. And they said, It sounds like you're feeling this way. I can't imagine that feeling or that experience. That sounds very difficult if you had a rough time. And you felt very supported and you felt heard. That sounds like a really good friend. Now, what if you have a good friend where you challenge each other? You see your friend struggling and you support them and you say, I really believe you can do something wonderful and you can get through this and I'm here to support you. And they do. And what if they do the same for you? And they support you through the ups and downs and you celebrate together. You are cheering each other on. It's like having an audience watching the movie of your hero's journey. Imagine you have an audience of people that love you and support you, and they're cheering you on and they're seeing you on your path, and you are doing that for them too. That sounds like wealth. So in some ways, I look at intrinsic abundance, bigger picture here, as I've described it as a map of life. But I'd also say this is the game of life. It's as if you're playing a game. So without interconnection, the game has no meaning. But without competence, you don't understand the game. Yet without autonomy, there is no game at all. Autonomy is I choose. I'm the player in the game. Competence is I'm learning. I understand the game better. I play it better. Interconnection is we play together. We don't play alone. And it has meaning. That sounds like true wealth to me. Well, if self-determination is wealth, what is poverty? So I had to say, well, let's assume autonomy is wealth. In that case, lack of autonomy would be poverty. So what is lack of autonomy? Maybe it's dependence. Oh, if you lack autonomy, you're very dependent. You're dependent on what happens to you. You feel powerless and out of control. If good things happen, it's lucky. If bad things happen, it's unlucky. It's almost like the game of life is no better than gambling. And if you feel powerless, that sounds like poverty, feeling powerless. That's not empowered. That's disempowered. And you know, when we think of dependence, we think dependent on other people. So even if your relationships are really, really bad and you're struggling, you're kind of stuck with them. You're stuck in a crappy job because you don't have the skill, and so on and so forth. That doesn't sound good. That sounds really tragic. Well then, if competence is wealth, lack of competence would be poverty. And if you're lacking skill, lacking wisdom, lacking knowledge, you'd say maybe you're ignorant. You have ignorance that you are struggling with. You make the same mistakes again and again. You stay stuck in the same habits that are harmful. They're not helping you. You feel kind of trapped. Maybe you don't even see how you are harming yourself. You know, when people have addictions or bad habits, they go around and around in circles. Maybe some part of them is convinced that if they make the same decision, it's going to lead to their life getting better. But because they have ignorance, it just keeps making their life worse. There's something they haven't learned yet, or they simply don't have the skill or the wisdom or the knowledge to make a better change that improves their life. That sounds like poverty. Well, then, if interconnection is wealth, lack of interconnection would be poverty. And if you really, really lack relationships in your life, you experience isolation. My God, isolation. Anybody who has struggled with this can tell you that this is not a good experience. Now, maybe some people are better at dealing with it than others, and some people are more introverted and less extroverted, but you're still interdependent on each other. If your relationships are poor quality, then yes, you're dependent, and you struggle, and you have conflict, and you feel trapped. But if your relationships are higher quality, you feel empowered. Again, you have a lot of autonomy in your interconnection, and they interact with each other. Now, if you look at isolation, you could think maybe you don't have a job, maybe you're and therefore you don't make money at all, and so you're homeless. That's a very severe form of isolation, where you have a hard time getting a job at all. And so maybe isolation for most people is not absolute, but it's just you are limited in the relationships you have. So you're kind of stuck with crappy people in a crappy job, and you have fewer choices, and you just lack the skill or the wisdom to make better friendships. You see how these start to interact with each other more and more? The quality of your relationships is lower, and you have fewer options, and maybe you're lonely. And so all of these, dependence, ignorance, isolation, as I was discovering, is a more clear and true definition of poverty. We can measure it in a completely different way. We don't have to look at necessarily the 5 basic needs: food, water, shelter, oxygen, and whatever the last one is. I don't remember offhand. I'm sure I'm missing one, but maybe safety. But we can measure basic needs in a completely different way. And it gives you a different way of measuring your progress in life and measuring what types of choices you want to make and the outcomes of those choices. Now we're starting to see this is like a map of life, and that maybe you want to overcome poverty and transcend it into self-determination, and that is how you define wealth. This can be much more individualized. Because not everybody is going to need the same type of stuff or materials. Everyone is going to say, I'm happy or satisfied with a different level of material wealth in my life. I don't need a big mansion. Some people might say, I need a big mansion, I'm going to make a lot of money. And if for anybody who has worked a high-paying job, they can tell you there's some big sacrifices you make for the sake of having a high-paying job. So there's a lot of trade-offs there. And when you pursue materialism, it has no guarantee of increasing your self-determination. To an extent, you can buy more choices in your life, but you can't buy all the choices. And it also, if you have to make a lot of money, it kind of makes you dependent on money. So there's really no guarantee that it's going to empower you. There's a lot of trade-offs. And you can't really buy your way into learning those life lessons. I guess you could pay for some classes, so to some extent you could buy your way into learning more, but you can't really guarantee it. There's certain things you learn through hardship, through pain, through loss, certain things you learn through direct experience. And also, if you pay for those classes and you don't do anything in the classes, you don't put in the effort to learn, then you're not going to learn. And in some cases, you might find, I'm trying, but I'm not really learning. I'm struggling. So you have to become more skillful, knowledgeable, and wiser about the process of learning itself. And likewise, with isolation, can you really pay your way into better relationships? That sounds like prostitution, and you can't get very far with that. So you really got to put in the effort. Of how do I form high-quality relationships? How can I be a good friend, a better friend? How do I find people who are the right people for me, who are compatible, who accept me, who maybe become good friends over time, who are going to treat me right? These are all processes of playing the game of life that really you can't guarantee with the materials you have. You can use materials like tools. A hammer is a tool, but it can't do everything. There's a lot of tools in life, and we can use them in a lot of different ways, but it can't do everything. And so let's reverse that. What happens if you pursue self-determination? How does that impact materialism in your life? Well, if you become highly skilled, you can get a pretty damn good job, and you have the leverage to have more choices because your employer, your boss, your coworkers, managers, they do have a general idea that you are valuable to the organization. And so you have leverage where you can stand up for yourself, you can set boundaries, and if you have a job that's just treating you poorly, where your relationships are really crappy, you say, all right, I'm going to go to a better one because I have the skill to make that choice. And that gets you more money. Wow. Well then, if you have relationships where you're supporting each other, you feel fulfilled, When bad things happen to you in life, you have that support and listening you need. You can get through those hardships. It helps you take on life and you feel strong and you feel resilient. I've been listened to. I've been empathized with. That can help you maintain a job, maintain your responsibilities, and you can continue to have the materials and the money that you need in life. Well, then what about autonomy? Well, if you find a way to have better choices in your life, maybe you're more motivated because you have a job where you find some sense of purpose in it. You find something that's meaningful. You find something you love. So even if you find you have a lot of responsibility, maybe your job has some challenge and it's high pressure, but if you find I can do this thing that's really purposeful and it is within my morals, so I'm really helping people, I can keep doing that job. And this can have a ripple effect throughout all of your choices, throughout your skills, throughout your relationships. And so your materialism does not guarantee to improve or increase your self-determination, but your self-determination can have profound effects on your materialism. So then it's up to you whether you decide if you want to map your life based on materialism or if you want to map your life based on self-determination. Which is the better compass for the game of life? The choice is yours.